Have you ever seen anybody pick an argument they couldn't win? And then instead of just cutting their losses and admitting that they've got the cognitive functions of J.D. Vance's dorm room couch, they muster all the critical thinking skills of a squirrel who's made it all the way across the road to the shoulder and then turns around to get run over by a car that was never going to hit them. It is some funny shit. Because I just had a guy pick a fight with me in my comments and then lose and then made up a whole different topic that had nothing to do with the original conversation. So essentially picking an argument with himself, and then he lost that argument with himself, and he doesn't even know it yet. But don't worry, I'm going to explain it to him in great detail for your viewing pleasure. So Zach here commented on a video I made about Trump being a moron and threatening to tariff Canada, which was going to result in Canada shutting off the power to millions of Americans. And Zach turns around and he's like, oh no, Democrats sub everything out, so instead of subbing everything out, we're just going to keep it on U.S. soil. Which he really believed, because he's a moron. Now, I wasn't gonna bother explaining electrical grid infrastructure and global economic markets to Zach because, you know, he's a moron. It's just like, dude, which party wants to privatize literally everything? I guess I probably should have clarified privatizing means subbing stuff out, Zach. Because you see, if the government's not providing a service itself, it means it's subcontracting it or subbing it out. And there's one party specifically that wants to privatize or, you know, sub out everything from education to healthcare to power, which is why the one state in the country with a completely privatized or, you know, subbed out electrical grid is not a democratic state. It's Texas. You know, the state that declared a state of emergency because a cool breeze shut down their entire energy system because, you know, the Republicans subbed it out. And you see, Zach had nothing to respond to that because I was, you know, right, and he's, you know, a moron. So it was done, his tail got ran over, but he made it to the shoulder, and all he had to do was scuttle off into the ditch and lick his wound, and just do some self-reflection about how he should never share his opinions on the internet ever again. You know, on account of him being a moron. But instead, Zach turned his little ass around and started froggering his way back across the interstate with this video response.
Look at this. Another dumb Democrat liberal talking out his ass, has no idea what he's fucking talking about. Maybe if he pulled his head out and did some research before he said America got all their eggs from Canada, he wouldn't look or sound so stupid. But here's some simple facts.
This had nothing to do with the topic at hand. He literally just picked this entire argument with himself and still somehow lost. First off, we were talking about electricity. I never said that the United States gets all of its eggs from Canada. And I wouldn't have said that because the United States doesn't get all of its eggs from Canada. It's a net exporter of eggs, which means we get all of our eggs from ourselves. But we still do import eggs. We have to meet demand, and one of those reasons is because of disease. In fact, right now, bird flu is ravaging the poultry industry. It's killing off chickens. You can't sell bird flu eggs. Speaking of which, if you've got your own personal birds, you need to be really aware of this and take some precautions as well, because this is decimating domestic birds too. But anyway, supply and demand. When shit like this happens, and stuff like this happens every year, and we lose some of our own supply, we need to supplement that with supply from someplace else. As a result, we import millions of dollars worth of eggs every year, and the majority of those, by a lot, come from fucking Canada. Which is, again, not an argument I ever even brought up, but it is an argument you lost with yourself. Zach, also continuing this argument with himself, shared this article that was trying to prove that we get all of our eggs from China, I guess. See, the article says that China produces the most eggs in the world, and Zach thought that this meant that we get all of our eggs from China because he's a moron. So Zach, I was gonna try to explain this to you using a crayon, but it froze because it's cold out. So I'm just gonna do my best to explain this real slow. China is a really big country. They're tied with India for the largest population on the planet, and they're the country with the third largest landmass in the world, which means that China has lots of space to farm things like eggs, for example. And they also have lots of people to do jobs like be egg farmers, for example. And they also have lots of people who eat food, like eggs, for example. So, well, yes, China is one of the largest producers of eggs in the world. They're also one of the largest consumers of eggs in the world. And sure, they export a lot of eggs to countries in, like, neighboring regions, like India, for example, that also have a lot of people who eat a lot of food, like eggs. So now, I don't know if you're following, because, you know, my frozen crayon and all, but that still doesn't mean that the United States gets all of its eggs, or even most of its eggs, from China. In fact, we get about $6 million worth of eggs from China, which is exponentially less than the $43 million worth of eggs we get from Canada, which combined with all of our other imports only accounts for about 1% of our total egg consumption. Because, you know, the United States produces way more eggs than it consumes. So, like, literally everything you've said is just, it's wrong. And I don't know why you decided to pick an argument with yourself that you couldn't win, because you picked it with yourself. You could have picked any argument in the world. Like, you could have picked an argument about the best way to court your sister, and you would have killed that one. But this is what you went with. Just doesn't make sense to me. So of the two of us here, I'm really not feeling like it was me who had my head up my ass. Now that you say that, it makes a lot more sense as to why you look like shit. And you should really get your head out of there, bud, because it is clearly turning what little gray matter you had brown. Ta-ta.